Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Hiya, Georgie.
Swallow this.
Cat dead. Details later. I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. So I put a poll up on my personal Instagram because I was debating, well, me and Zayford were both debating. We felt a little bit stuck. We didn't really know where to go from here. Obviously, we've started recording again fairly recently in the past couple months. And yeah, we needed your help about what you wanted to listen to and what we should be talking to you about. So we got a couple of requests for the Disturbing Iceberg. Currently, where we sit is tier 5 of the iceberg. There's a couple of movies that we haven't actually covered in that tier. So probably the next couple of episodes will be covering Vase de Noche, excuse Zayford, he's been vaping for hours, and
Water went down wrong hole.
Begotten will be another one that we'll be talking about as well. We were both given the opportunity to veto one film of our choosing pertaining to going on the website doesthedogdie.com and seeing if there were any triggers. The one thing that stood out to me overwhelmingly on this list was, of course, a Serbian film. So we vetoed that. We won't be doing that. We don't feel like we need to or
Yeah, I
want
think
to.
we discussed that before, like a while ago.
Yeah.
That we was
So,
veto, wasn't it? Because fuck that
yeah.
film, and yeah.
Yeah, but it's just sort of like a reminder that like because the Disturbing Iceberg is out there. I do post about it a lot, but we're ignoring that movie. So Zayford still has his veto. He's not vetoed anything yet, but that was my strong veto. But I think that was kind of like a joint veto. We both don't really want to talk about it because it's a piece of shit.
I'll pick some once I've seen it and being like, yeah, fuck that film.
Yeah,
But to be fair, I think I'll be alright.
yeah. So this is episode 68. We're going to be covering Come and See. This is a Soviet war movie. Now, I was apprehensive initially, as was Zayford, about covering this episode because A, we're not war film enthusiasts, we're horror enthusiasts, and B, it's a Russian Soviet propaganda movie. So there was a lot of certain apprehension at the content and how accurate and realistic it actually was. So I watched Come and See quite a while ago. So we're talking the middle of last year. And upon my first viewing of it, I have to admit, the first hour or so of the film, I wouldn't call it tedious, but it was definitely quite difficult for me to adjust and connect to it because it's just not typically the type of stuff that I watch. I did, however, feel really, really invested in the main protagonist, Flora, and the girl that he meets later on in the movie as well. Um, and yeah, the last hour of that movie, Matt, it ruined me. It ruined me. I had tears in my eyes. I had a shocked look on my face. It is for me the worst movie I have experienced on this iceberg for sure, and potentially the most disturbing film I've ever seen. So, Zayford and I, we do discuss briefly movies outside of the podcast. We try to keep it brief so that we have content to put into the podcast without constantly mirroring.
Typically it's a film that's not going to be on the podcast.
Yeah, we talk about some films and for instance Zayford sent me a advert for the Americanized version of Speak No Evil the other day, and I'm very very against the idea of that movie being Americanized because I don't think it would work. Obviously the
I
character
like the way it looks. I want to see it. James
the
McAvoy,
character
that's enough for me.
right, so at first he sent me it and I was like, I'm not even going to look at it because it's going to be rubbish and it's going to make me cross. And I sat and thought about it, and I thought, well, do you know what? You like that movie that much? Give the trailer a chance and see what happens. And of course, I did see James McAvoy, and I did see that the characters in themselves were British and not American, because I felt like if it was an American family, two American families, that would not have worked because Americans are like, I know my rights. I know what I'm entitled to. This is wrong. I will shoot you. No, no,
Yeah,
no. And there is
everyone would have been shot within 5 minutes of that film.
it would have, the first inappropriate thing that happened, they'd be like, no, I'm leaving and I'm talking to your manager and that's it. It's over for you. I'm going to take your job. You're fucked. So the fact that it's British people, I think there may be a potential that this could be interesting. However, it does seem to be a kind of, rather than a reinterpretation, a sort of play by play of what's already in the movie, the original one, which is Swedish, I want to say.
Something
Danish?
along those lines.
Danish or
It's
Swedish?
that sort of region.
Yeah. So we'll just say Swedish.
I want to say
Oh,
Danish and like Netherlands sort of area.
yeah, that kind of thing. So, and it's so well done that, like, yeah. So I'm all for giving movies a chance eventually.
My only issue with the trailer was they showed way too much of the spooky aspects of it.
What you mean, the hidden connotations of why
Yeah,
the child has no tongue?
yeah.
Mm,
Like they showed
mm.
way more of that than they did in the original trailer for the original film.
Yeah, I remember that actually because after I'd watched it, I did stumble across this trailer after I'd seen the movie, and it was very ambiguous. Yeah. Um, so yeah, it does give quite a lot away in the trailer. I think I probably will give it a chance, to be honest with you. I think the fact that James McAvoy is in it kind of gave me a little bit of hope
And
because
he's the bad guy.
he's very good at being the bad guy too.
Like,
This is
well, I
the
mean,
thing.
I'd have been happy even if he was playing like the good dad. But the
Well,
fact that he's
I
playing
don't.
the bad guy, and it's like shit. I know he can do good, fucking scary. He can do a good scary face, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So I have somewhat, but not overly hopeful at it, and I don't think I'm alone in the horror community. I think a lot of people feel quite like not happy that that's being remade and so soon. It's sort of like the shared belief of Martyrs as well when that was Americanized. I've never even seen the American version of Martyrs, so I can't comment on it, but I have heard that it's really not worth a damn compared to the original. And obviously, Martyrs is one of my favorite movies, and I wouldn't want it to be ruined. So, yeah, obviously, this iceberg mainly pertains to horror movies, but there have been a couple of movies that aren't uh, implicitly horror. So, I would say Mother wasn't really a horror, more of a, oof, I don't know, subversive psychological thing.
Thriller sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's been stuff like, I'm just trying to think. There's been a couple of things that aren't inherently horror, but are nonetheless very disturbing. Even Megan is Missing, obviously that falls under the subgenre of found footage, but it's very low budget and all the rest of it. And that being one of the first ones to do was just so funny to us because we still can't believe that it is so high up and in the likes of Saw and Seven and Midsummer, it does not belong there. So I did briefly discuss this with Zayford before we started recording and asking him like what his initial views of it was. And he said it was all right. It was a bit, a bit boring. And I think the reason that he said
Call me
that
out like
is,
that, why don't you?
I think the reason that he said that, because I am going to defend you, because like I said, I can't say exactly it was tedious, but it was difficult for me to engage in because it's just not the type of movies that we're invested in typically. So I think I understand where he was coming from on that viewpoint. That said, he was in agreement that the last portion of the movie was extremely disturbing and upsetting, and it upon like reflection of it, he says that it belongs in the tier that it's in. No, sorry, you said it belongs in tier four, the one
Yeah,
above
the one
it.
above it.
Yeah, so I feel it belongs in tier five personally because it's the worst one I've seen so far. So
I
yeah,
feel
let's
like
get it.
there's so much. I feel like there's so much worse that you can do.
Go on.
Just, I mean, look at Serbian film. That's
Well,
like a
there's
tier 5 film purely because it's fucking stupid. Never
yeah,
mind what's actually in the film.
vulgarity is an entertainment, and I think that this is one film that really got to me in the sense that it was real, it really happened, and there was that realism element also Megan is missing, and the fact
Yeah,
that
because that was in like
Zayford
tier
and
1.
yeah, and the fact that Zayford and I both have children, both have daughters, even some of the partying scenes and stuff, just very uncomfortable, very unpleasant, just not nice viewing at all. And then the gradual descension into child rape and horrific scenes. We have an episode on Megan is Missing, and I implore you, if you haven't listened to it before, do please give it a listen because it is literally one of our best episodes. We dissected that film very thoroughly and we gave it the respect that it deserved because of the content that it contained and that it was namely about children.
Yeah, and
And it,
I'm pretty sure there's like no tangents in that film either.
what do you
For
mean?
once. Like, usually if we're having a conversation, it goes to like, oh, what's this new film or this other old film? That
Yeah,
one was purely just the film. Like,
yeah.
usually we tend to try and keep
It
it very conversational.
Yeah, so and we made quite the effort to do that mainly because of the content of it, but also because it was very viscerally disturbing for both of us. So you can see the impact of that episode, of that movie in the episode when we talk about it, because it clearly affected us both. So when I asked Seyfried, like, well, what's worse than Come and See? He obviously came up with, Megan is Missing, obviously, and I was like, you have a point. You have a point. And I did subject my friend to a viewing of Megan is Missing. I accompanied him, and that would
It's
be the
been the
third.
third time she's watched it.
Yeah, this would be the third time I'm not watching it again. For the record, if anyone actually wants to watch it and buddy up one night and watch it with me, I'm sorry, Zayford will take the bullet because he watched it once. Um, I'm
I
not
don't even
doing
own
it.
it. I don't even know where to buy it from.
It
You own the physical copy, you weird
that
person.
that does that does not work because of the region issues, and there's such a low res quality of it available on BoobTube. But it is a boob of a quality that it's rubbish. Like, it's you can't even really see what's going on. So yes, if you can maybe go over to effed up movies, I'm sure it will be on there. Should you feel you want to have your pedophilic hatred for children being killed thirst quenched. But I digress. This
Or just don't
episode,
watch it and listen to the episode. It's so much easier.
yeah, I mean, our episode is really, really
And it,
thorough.
it
We do,
helps
we,
us.
yeah, please, yeah. But our episode is really, really thorough and doesn't even need to be a companion to Megan is Missing. You could just, if you feel that child rape, child torture, abduction, and in that found footage sense is too much, then listen to our version because you will definitely know the ins and outs of the story and appreciate it for what it is, and it will probably compel you to want to watch it. But it's a good companion episode and it's a good standalone episode, so it's your choice. With Come and See, however, God, there's just so much to talk about. Firstly, we're seeing the end of World War II, where the Nazis are beginning to lose control of a lot of what they've taken over in Eastern Europe, and the uprising of the partisans who are joining forces in remote villages to fight against. I mean, most of these people are unskilled soldiers, they're farmers, they're people of the land, and these people, these Nazis are coming into their way of life and literally obliterating entire communities. What's disturbing the most, some of the most disturbing aspects of it is the fact that the SS Delvangers actually did this 642 times. And there's a certain amount of efficiency to the mass murder that they cause, a lot of it involving fire, making people burn to death in big buildings. And there's a lot of sadism there's a lot of torture, there's a lot of rape, there's a lot of pillaging, stealing. Um, it is basically the annihilation of um, of a race of people. They don't want them to exist, and they see them as subhuman, and that's their view. And it's very difficult to understand radicalization, even now in present time, with places, organizations such as Hamas, ISIS, what's going on in Ukraine, in with Vladimir Putin, and there's so many terrorist things happening all over the world constantly that are being executed by these extremely sophisticated and vengeful forces. And obviously, a lot of people have had a long time to dissect the reasons why and how these things happen. And we know all about Hitler Youth and how Germans were made to feel like they were the superior race. So, upon looking at the people that are executing these other humans in the way that they are, they really do believe that they're doing what's right in eradicating them, and that they should be treated like the pests, the rats that they are. And it's just absolutely horrifying that they almost feel jovial. You can definitely feel a sadism throughout the film, towards the partisans and towards these villagers, and a real hatred that they just should not exist. So it's it was very informative. A lot of people believe it's like the best war movie ever made, and a lot of people surmise it as war is hell. The way that I can depict this best to you without you having seen Come and See is that there is these very strange, excuse me, but visceral moments in the film where there are individuals pertinent to the film that look directly into the screen at you. There's direct contact, and it's prolonged. And the reason that this was done is to show you came and saw. This is real. This actually happened. This is hell. And there's just something about the way that the hopelessness, the disparity, the shock, the horror on the faces of these people, various people throughout the movie, particularly Flora, as you gradually see the effects of what war does to his body, especially facially. He grows wrinkles over the months that he is involved with the partisans uprising and going through these atrocities. So it's a fantastic depiction of compounded trauma and CPTSD, because it really does encapsulate that gradual dissension and then complete inability to get out of that situation. And Flora starts off with a big smile on his face. He wants to go and fight. He wants to protect his sisters and his mum. He wants to be a part of the partisans uprising because he wants to be a man. And instead of learning what it is to be a man, he has his childhood destroyed and is replaced with a haggard, horrific face towards the end. And it's not a coming of age story. It's a coming of destruction of innocence in a child. I think some of the most poignant scenes for me were at the beginning of the movie when he has a big smile on his face and he's eager to join up with the partisans. It's very clear that the two soldiers that come into the home of Flore and his mother and his two children are very, very, very much aware that there's going to be, they're coming, basically. But because Flora is so ignorant to everything that's going on, he doesn't really understand that actually his family are probably going to be killed after he leaves. He's so caught up in it all. So they take him to the Parsons envoy, and he's made to do all these low-grade tasks of cleaning pots and pans, like with reefs of leaves and whatnot, and left to do all the dirty work, and sort of like viewing everything around him and trying to figure out what's actually going on here. And there seems to be a bit of a debauchery going on in the partisans as well. They're not entirely innocent. And he befriends a girl who, it's not exactly revealed overtly that she is somewhat of a sexual abuse victim, but it's pretty clear from her demeanor that she has been terrorized by men and traumatized by war. So they start a befriendment. They have a few shared folie à deux between them, where they laugh and have fun like children do, and the madness and silliness of his boot being filled up with water, and her crying and being covered in mud and being fed up. In these moments of childlike innocence, bombs start falling, and Flore has actually lost his hearing because the bombs hit so closely. They decide to frolic in the forest for a little while and be kids and be wild and be free. Flore is upset because he couldn't go along with the partisans. He's been left behind, so he ends up going on a little bit of a side quest with this girl, and it's the only thing that's keeping him sane, to be honest, to have another child around him. So they have this almost euphoric moments with each other where, although war is hell and happening around them, they respect each other as individuals. Flora gets in his mind that he really wants her to come back to meet his mum and his sisters. So they both wander, obviously shell shocked, and he's deaf, so he can't really hear much, and his vision isn't great either, and I'm sure she's quite shell shocked and paralyzed with fear. But they try to come into the home, which is covered in flies. The food has been left out for days, so he's obviously very hungry, as is she. He says, "Oh, my mum's made us some soup. Let's eat it together." They start eating it. They realize how rotten it is, and then all the flies that are around, just there's so much of it. It just seems way too much for it to just be about food. As they sort of look around the room, particularly the girl, and I will find her name, bear with me. She starts to realize that actually, why are they not there anymore? And why is there so much rotting food, and why are there so many flies? And it actually dawns on her that the family has been eradicated, but Flora won't accept that. He kind of continues to live in a shell-shocked reality where he's at home and he's safe in his children. And it pans over to some dolls that are on the floor that were very important to his two little sisters. And there's almost a sort of realization of what's actually happened, what's actually occurred. So they walk out of the house, stumble, and he takes so many steps forward that he almost misses what's actually happened. And what's actually happened is that all of the villagers, all of them, his mother, his sisters, everyone in his village has been piled up behind his house, and they're all rotting and decaying. And you can actually see his two little sisters among that pile. And he just keeps running and running and running. The girl follows him, to try and comfort him, but she's also absolutely horrified as well. You need to understand that when you're in a war zone, these things are, even though they're commonplace, these are extremely disturbing things that people are having to see. Real people, it's real horror, so you can't imagine how somebody can process that, if they can at all. And Flore somewhat loses his mind and wanders into a swamp and says, "No, my family are here. They're here. They're here. They're here on this part of the thing. They've run over to this part." And she's grabbing hold of him to try and get some sense into him, but he can't face it. He can't face it. And then a soldier comes along and he sees, that she's in distress, and she says he's lost it. He's gone crazy. He's shell shocked. He can't hear properly. His whole family are dead. They're all dead, but he doesn't believe me. And so the soldier takes them both back to the main camp of where the partisans and refugees are staying at. And there are very many hungry children, babies, women, helpless people, but there are soldiers there too. And it turns out that the partisans who initially left him and, went off without him, most of them are dead. And their sergeant or lieutenant has actually had gasoline poured on him. They poured petrol all over him and set him alight. And he's still alive, but barely. And he talks to Flora about like what is going on, what's happening. And there's just a disbelief of the inhumanity of what these people are doing to these people. For what? For why? So you imagine trying to process all of these things. Flora is exhausted, malnourished, shell shocked, deaf, injured slightly as well. He's seen his family murdered, not seen them as they were killed, but the aftermath of it, and gone back to the family house to find them. And that is so deeply, deeply disturbing for him. In the madness of it all, they decide to do an effigy to Hitler, a sort of scarecrow, if you will. And they have him sort of stood up for everyone to spit on, which it's a very macabre scene that's fitting, because where else are they going to be able to take this frustration out on? They're helpless. So they do spit on it as a sign of massive disrespect. And then they decide to use this scarecrow that they're in with a group of other lads to go on a bit of a mission to get food, because they're in dire need of food in the refugee camp. So they take the Hitler thing off of them, the little Nazi scarecrow they've made, and they travel down to some farmers, and they say that, we need your cow. We But while they're
They
traveling,
don't really say they need the cow. They just kind of like, look, we're taking your cow, lay down
yeah,
in this mud, go back to your wife.
yeah. So even though these are supposed to be the good guys, they have kind of lost their minds through the absolute horrificness of war. So because you can't be polite in these situations at this point. There are people who are starving and they need help. And while I respect why they did it, it's very upsetting to see that there are no good sides to war. Everyone behaves badly ultimately. But on their mission doing this, they actually end up getting flyers thrown out of aircraft that are written in language that's not very clear, and then they are then bombed a little bit, and then they're shot at a little bit, and it gets to the point where Flore is pretty much the only one left, and he's left with the cow, and the cow gets shot, and Zaphod was quite upset about the cow dying.
I was like, that's a bit fucked up. It's like, come on. What did the
That could
cow
have
do?
fed that
What
that
did the
could have
cow do?
that could have fed like 20 people. What the fuck?
No, the point.
Uh,
The cow was just like, man, I'm in my own little farm. Why you got to
yeah,
take me out here and get me killed?
and there's just this beautiful, melancholic, poignant vision of Flore falling asleep against the cow in the fogginess of morning, and waking up and realizing where he is and what he has to do. Upon awaking, he starts digging around for guns and more artillery and stuff. Actually, that's what he's doing at the very beginning of the film with his friend. They're looking for guns, So he's doing the same thing, foraging for weapons, and has to lay down dead a couple of times so he's not caught by cars driving past and whatnot, who are obviously the Dalvangers doing their disgusting things. And eventually he comes across a man that explains to him, you're going to have to take on a whole different persona. Your name is this, your brother is this, your sister is, you have two sisters, you have this, this, and this. So he's being told that he has to take on a whole new identity to survive this current situation that he's in, because where he's heading, they they have it in their minds that if they can prove that they belong to a certain sect in the community, they will be safe. Of course, the eradication is not so widespread at the moment that word of mouth is spreading about how severe the eradication of the entire communities is happening. So these people still believe they have hope. So they end up in a farmhouse with a bunch of other people, a lot of people, and people are practicing their lines almost of like, who they are, what they are in the community, so they can survive. The SS soldiers are not interested in the stories. In fact, they're not really interested in any of it all, except they want them all to die. Um, and therein begins the most disturbing part of the movie. So this is the part that really, really got to me. Really got to me on a very, very deep level. The absolute mockery of it all, that there was propaganda music being played, and the tannoys were saying things like, you need a it was basically old music. It was basically like old propaganda that they had put out to Jews to reassure them that where they were going to the camps, that they needed a toothbrush, they needed a hairbrush, you need to be well groomed. And this is playing on the tannoys, which is very confusing. They don't understand what the fuck is going on. So you hear this jovial music, this jovial German music, and then you hear all this propaganda and information about how you need to get toothbrushes and things like that. However, what's actually going on is we then meet some of the most brutal characters in the film, who are absolute sadists and take no mercy on any of these people. These people are frightened, they're confused, they don't understand what's going on. All they know is they're being told one thing and pushed another way, and it doesn't make any sense what's going on. Essentially, what begins to happen is they begin to herd them all like sheep into a barn, a large barn, and they manage to pretty much get everybody and anybody that they want in that barn, in there. You've even got some SS soldiers that are carrying children into there to throw them into the barn.
Well, there was even the SS soldier that got trapped behind the door,
Yeah,
but only just managed to get out.
spineless coward, expressing absolute fear for one moment he got to experience,
Yeah.
and they decide to speak over the whole barn at the top, and they sort of say, right, we will let you go if you let the children stay. So you may leave if you keep your children here to burn. And obviously there's an outcry and outrage. There's people saying, bastard, evil, you know, there's a mixture of like old men, women, children, babies. There's a lot of crying going on. There's people going for windows that are then getting shot. There's one woman that actually tries to escape with her child, this part of the episode is the most extremely part that gets upsetting, but I will delve into that in a moment. So this woman, she gets dragged away. Nothing happens yet, but she gets dragged away to spectate, and her child is then thrown back into the building. They just throw him back in there like he's just a piece of kindling. And obviously nobody agrees with the idea that putting the children there and them leaving is a good idea. And they feel like because they've given them that option, that we're going to move forward with our plan now. And they fucking torch the place. They torch it. Um,
Torch it,
they
shoot it.
they torch it, shoot it, and then they flamethrower it just to end it. And one of the agonizing, the most agonizing thing is that Flore, so he was in the building, but he managed to escape, and they sort of use him as a little toy and then kind of ignore him. And he's just sat there being a spectator to the absolute desecration of the whole of the village. And his face says it all. He is horrified. Um, Bearing in mind, we're hearing children screaming, women screaming, men pleading for their lives. We're hearing the tannoy of the jovial propaganda music. We're hearing the instructions of toothpaste and toothbrush being played on a loop. We're watching people observing in the SS eating lobster, and one actually has like a little pet mink on his shoulder, one of the colonels, and
Yeah.
they're just sitting and observing and making sure that the Delbangers get the job done. There's also a man initially that spoke to Flora, that he explained that, like, this will be your new name and all that. He ends up like trying, he's a bit yellow bellied and a bit of a coward. And then he sort of loses his temper and says how wrong all of this is. So they shoot him, and then they strip him, and then they stick a sign on him saying, I said, I can't remember what it said word for word. In English interpretation, it was something like, I spoke badly of Germans or something like that. And
Yeah,
they
it was
have,
along those lines.
yeah, and they have him laying on the back of a motorcycle, like a pull along, uh like a,
It's a motorcycle with a sidecar.
right, on the sidecar. So he's lying there with a sign punched into his chest, naked, being paraded around in a circle. And there's people guffawing at this. So you imagine that you're hearing laughter, you're hearing screaming. You know that babies are in this building. You know that there's a tannoy playing with this music. And the flames are so loud. The fire is so vicious. It almost becomes an incomprehensible audio disaster. It is so fucking loud. And Flora is watching all of this happen and watching the bemusement of the soldiers, and is just, he doesn't understand. He is just a child and he doesn't understand. And he's been plunged into war and plunged into hell. And if hell was if hell was depicted as the construct that the Christians had it as, that would be hell. He is in it. To add insult to injury, they then pull Flora to the side to take a picture with him, where they aim a gun at his head for entertainment. And when they're finished with him, they throw him to the floor.
Yeah,
He's
I'm pretty
left.
sure he was like, just do it, just pull the trigger.
He had the look of on his face is still etched in my mind, of pure terror, confusion, of a little boy that just watched hundreds of people die, hundreds of people are spectating and laughing, and he is at the mercy of everything. He is not a man, he's not a boy, he's not even a person. He is just the end product of war. So they take this picture of him and just leave him on the ground where everything's burning. They very very weird moment. They take a grandma out of they carry her in a bed, and they say,
That,
we will leave you here for breeding. So there she
yeah,
is watching.
that was the only thing that was kind of like out of place because it was a little bit funny.
It's not that I found it funny. It was just more like, well, it was degradation, wasn't it? It was humiliation,
Yeah,
like, because she's gonna die. There's no food, there's no people, there's nothing, and she
but she
lays
seemed
there
very
with.
comfortable with it because she wasn't exactly upset.
I think she was on her deathbed, to be honest with you, and she probably didn't really know what was going on, much like everyone didn't. So you imagine the elderly and infirm, they showed no mercy to them and to babies, and the fact that they left there and said this crass comment like, we'll leave you there for breeding, shows what they thought of them as human life. They thought nothing of them whatsoever. So I guess they felt that she's no threat to them because she's bedridden. So fuck it, let her watch it. Imagine your last moments being spent on Earth watching everyone that you loved and everyone that you know burning to death, and your whole life just is over, and that being your last moments, you know. And then they drive off, and the woman whose child was thrown into the barn minutes before is now thrown into the back of an envoy truck. There are men literally dying to get inside that truck when she's thrown in there.
There's about
And you,
20 men in the truck already.
yes,
Minus,
yes,
then there's like, what, 10, 15 of them trying to clamber in as well.
it's disgusting. The way that it drives away in such a almost comical way, but you know that that woman is about to be viciously attacked and maimed and damaged and hurt, and you could only imagine what is happening because of and like I said, because of the incomprehensible noise that's going on, you can't even barely hear her screams because there's so much going on. There's Her child is burning to death in that building, and she's having to deal with this. It's horrific. So Flora, after everything has happened and they've all driven away, decides to walk into the forest nearby. And when he gets further down the path, he sees that the Delvangers have actually been intercepted by the partisans. And the once very confident, very up themselves, very entitled SS got to be humiliated in well, we see one woman eating lobster while all this is going down, and let's just say you see a big full breasts hanging out in a car crash because she's been completely disrespected and probably in death to show you're no woman, you're no person, you're evil, you know. So that was quite impactful for me to show that the partisans had some sort of hatred for what was happening to the women. It was almost like you should experience this too. Let you die with your bare breasts hanging out and, you know, suffer. Um, and then herein comes the worst part of the film. We hear a whistle faintly in the background, and it gradually comes closer and closer and closer. Flore looks rather numb looking at the SS car wreck and the people that died among him. He feels he's quite flat effect because he knows what they've done. So, but this whistle, it gets louder and louder and louder until it's a few steps away from him. He turns around and he sees the mother of the child that was thrown into the building to be burnt to death. Her legs from the top of her thighs to her ankles are covered in blood. She's been raped. She has a whistle in her mouth and cut up lips. And this is one of the breaking of the fourth wall, where she looks directly into the camera and continues to blow the whistle until it falls out of her mouth. And a close-up of her face then becomes apparent. And she looks directly into the camera as if to say, this is war, this is real, war is hell, this isn't entertainment. And we can only imagine the horrors of what she had to deal with in the back of that truck. But it leaves a lot to imagination with the state that she's in. Flora, obviously completely numb to all of it by this point. He looks at her, he sees her, he's shocked, but he doesn't say anything. He looks over and sees that the partisans have returned and they've come to sort of collect him and say, come on, boy, we've got to go forward now. Knowing that he's lost his family, knowing that there's such a hopelessness at being able to fight such an efficient bunch of massacreists, and the sadism that he's involved with, it's etched on his face that hope and freedom is lost, and he is now a product of war. And as we move in towards the end of the movie, for some reason, we find a photo of Hitler in a puddle, like a framed picture that obviously was probably kept in some SS person's car or something like that. Flora,
Probably in the Colonel's.
yes, yes. Flora, um, we'll get to the picture in a moment, because before that happens, there's a very important scene that happens. So they managed to capture a couple of them that had engaged in the massacre before, and we can hear their side of the story, I suppose. The colonel, with the little mink thing on his shoulder, says he's an old man and he had nothing to do with it, and he's very old and he has grandchildren, and tries to tell this whole story through an interpreter. The rest of them are yellow-bellied, but then there's this one Russian, a Russian who freely admits that actually he did say everyone can leave but the children, and he says it's because they are a race that shouldn't exist.
Well,
And
one of that
stuff.
they wanted to destroy the youth, so they couldn't, like, the next generation as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was his reasoning. He's like, you shouldn't exist. We don't want you to exist. You shouldn't be here. And he's got his fellow comrades, his fellow pathetic comrades, sort of like nudging him to tell him to shut up, and he's not shutting up because he really believes that. And a man comes up to him and says, two of my children were there when this happened. How can you do that? And he just wants to bayonet him straight away. And eventually the mob mentality just gets way too much, and they get gasoline poured on them. And while they're trying to ask them subjective questions, they realize that they cannot argue with these products of hell. They are no longer people, and they end up shooting them and killing them and leaving them there to rot. This is where
Yeah,
we get.
the gasoline
Sorry.
thing was just a whole scare tactic.
Yeah, yeah. They just wanted to dehumanize them. Yeah. Because like I said, they just stopped becoming people at that point. You can't humanize anyone who could do such disgusting things. So we get to the point that I mentioned before, because I accidentally sort of grazed over that little bit there. And we see Flora looking at a picture of Hitler in a puddle, which again, like we said, could have possibly been in the colonel's car. We don't really know. And it's there, and he takes a gun that he's taken from one of the dead soldiers they've just killed, and he decides to shoot indiscriminately into the puddle at Hitler. And we then are faced with a montage of Hitler slowly doing everything but backwards. So we see the Holocaust, we see the dead bodies in the camps, we see um, the stars and the special uniforms made for the Jews. We see gradual racism going backwards all the way to Hitler Youth, and of course his infamous speeches where he was just like a god to Germans. And he keeps shooting over and over again. I want to kill him. I want to kill him. I want to kill him. This shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have happened. And he shoots and shoots and shoots and shoots. And it goes so far back into history, so far back into the bombings and people lying dead on the street and the aeroplanes and everything. And Lacrimosa by Mozart is playing while this is happening, which is an absolutely perfect song to have in this movie. Very, very emotive, very impactful, and very fitting. It's one of the saddest classical songs that have ever been written. And he shoots and shoots and shoots and shoots, and all of a sudden, Hitler as a baby in his mother's arms, and he looks at that, and he stares into Hitler's eyes as a baby, and yet he doesn't shoot. And that's where we see that Flora is not a product of war, and he still has his humanity, even in the face of pure evil. So while innocence is lost, and you can literally see the aging on his face, which I think is a fantastic thing that they did, because the film is not a case of over a few days, it's over about 6 months to a year. the aging that you see on his face is catastrophic. He doesn't look like the kid at the beginning of the film. He looks like an old man. But could he shoot Hitler in all of that? Is he a monster just like them? And so he stares for a long time, and a younger soldier sort of says, "Come on, we need to go." And then his sergeant turns to him and says, "Flora, we must leave. Onwards, forwards." And so he turns around and he follows. And that's pretty much the whole film from start to finish. So I appreciate that Zafe had barely spoken any of that.
That's because I know you remember the film a lot better than I do. I only really remember like after the cow.
Okay, so I've seen it twice. That's probably why.
Yeah.
And in second viewing, I would give it a lot of my attention because I wanted to see if the movie was impactful as it first was, or if it was just shock value for me, and it still was for me. So Zayford obviously found the second half of the movie to be much more impactful than the first half. But as I've picked apart the CPTSD processing of Flora and the loss of innocence, the loss of humanity, people becoming products of war, and just the general sadism that is prevalent throughout I have to say, it is the most disturbing film I've ever seen.
I can tell it has clearly affected you.
Yes. And I wanted to make sure that we gave this episode justice because this really happened to people. It really did, and it happened on such a huge scale, and it did not feel right to me to sort of like meander to other topics too much or deviate from the film too much because I think that it deserves to have that discussion, or in our case, I suppose, a monologue about the reflection of what this movie as an individual for me to watch it. And like I said, I'm not a war movie buff at all, but it did something to me. It affected me, and it was very deep for me. So yeah. Any tidbits, final thoughts for that, Zayford?
I mean, I don't really have any tidbits other than the fact that the girl was called Olga.
Olga, yes, of course. Thank you for that.
And I'll be honest, I totally missed it being the woman that had the kid thrown back in. I thought it
Yeah.
was Olga the one was put in the van, the truck.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but do you know what? Like I was saying with the audio being so incomprehensible, it adds
Chaotic.
this yeah, it's incomprehensible, and like you don't understand what's going on because there's chaos going on everywhere, right? There's like somebody being paraded around on the back of a motorcycle who's dead. There's photographs
Never
being
mind.
taken as
There's no one driving that motorcycle. It's just
yeah,
going by
yeah,
itself.
yeah, just for fun. And there's people laughing and kicking rocks and having fun, and then there's people pillaging, and then there's people making sure that nobody can get out and throwing them back in the building, and then there's a flamethrower going on as well. So it was very easy to miss these details because it's chaos. It's
Oh
absolute
yeah.
chaos and
Which
carnage.
is what war is.
Yes, war is hell. War is hell, and it is depicted perfectly um in that movie. It really is. And it to me, I had tears in my eyes on several different occasions because I really felt for Flora and Olga. They're just children at the end of the day. They're not adults, and for them to be thrusted into such a brutal and horrific situation, to know that these things happen in present day too, and that they are still happening on a scale that is disgusting. And we have news media that says like what's happening with Israelites, and we have stuff that's happening with Palestinians. We have stuff that's happening with ISIS. We have stuff that's happening with Syria. We have stuff that's happening in Ukraine. We have the governments such as Russia, Saudi Arabia, oppressive governments like North Korea. Totalitarian states still exist, as do genocides and murder. We have learned nothing from World War II, and if only we could have. if only it could have ended there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to end. Not until someone fires the nuke.
Is
It's going
that
to be
what
one of
it
those
takes?
things.
Is it going to have to be a Fallout situation where we've all got to start again?
Yeah, realistically. I mean,
Mm.
if we didn't learn from, 2 major world wars, then we're not going to learn anytime soon.
And I actually wanted to take a pilgrimage to Poland to go to one of the concentration camps, just to see for myself with my own eyes. I think it's something that everyone should experience. I think that World War II is massively overlooked. I think there are a lot of facets to the World War II that we just weren't taught about at secondary school level history anyway.
Mm.
Um, I only found out much about like the rapes of Nanking, the Chinese situation. I found out about that as an adult. And all the horrific things in between in history. We really can be the most evil to our own, and we are our own biggest flaw and enemy, and ultimately we will be our own demise. But I just feel, upon reflection, particularly talking about Flora, shooting into that picture, there was some sort of part of me that felt, God, I've been on a journey, but to know that Flora had not become a product of war and had not become a monster, that kind of gave me a little bit of weird hope. And who knows what happened to him after that? That's the thing. He could have been killed like an hour later. We don't know, do we? Because that's how war is. And that's
Oh,
what it
yeah.
was like throughout the movie. It was very unpredictable. We didn't know what was going to happen next. So, yeah. So, what was your rating on Letterboxd for this?
Um, like 3.5, I think.
Okay, pretty good.
I mean, realistically, it's not something I'm going to watch again. So it's like
I think
middle.
I think I think it's a one and done kind of movie. You don't want to watch it.
Says the person who's watched it twice.
I watched it twice because we were going to be doing this episode on it, and I wanted fresh eyes on it, because it was last year I watched it, and I just
Mm.
wanted to see if it was as impactful as I remembered. Um, but yeah, for me, it was a five-star movie. I thought it was perfect. There's a reason why the director chose to only make one movie. He said, I did what I came to do, and that's it, and I'm done. I don't need to do anything else. That was what I wanted to do. And a lot of people say it is like the best war movie, the most perfect movie ever made about World War Two. I would have to agree on the films that I have seen.
I mean, it's the most realistic at the very least.
Yes, totally. And I think we do whitewash things a lot when it comes to war, and there was no whitewashing in that film whatsoever. So for me, it was a five-star movie. I thought it was perfect. I really, really enjoyed it. Can't say I enjoyed it. That's not the right word. That's not the right thing
Yeah,
for me to say. It was a very, very poignant cinematic experience for me. It
it
affected
kept your
me.
attention for the most part.
Yeah, and like I said, it was hard at first to concentrate on it because it was a war film, but it was the best war film I've ever seen, and I stand by that. So yeah, um, come and see. We came and saw, and I kind of wish I hadn't. But I think it's an important film. So if you ever get the opportunity to want to watch it, it has actually been remastered on YouTube. The director gave full permission, so it is completely ad-free also. You can watch it for free. It does not cost you any money, which is fantastic. I think it should be a free educational film. Um, Maybe don't watch it with your kids though. Wait till they're a bit more older.
It's also
Um,
2.5 hours, so bear that in mind.
it is a commitment. You've got to sit and watch it
Yeah.
and give it the attention.
And
Much
when you
like
try to
Skin,
watch it in the middle of the day, it's like, oh my days.
yeah, and much like Skinamarink, give it the space it deserves because it deserves that space for you to have that atmosphere of not having any interruptions for 2.5 hours or whatever, which can be hard when you have children and stuff. We both know that more than anybody. But I found myself watching it quite late at night on my own, and it was very impactful for me. But yeah,
Yeah, I think I watched it when everyone was out.
okay, yeah. So, any final thoughts on this movie, Zaphod?
No, no.
Well, I think you can tell that I'm very passionate about this movie and advocative for it hard like really hard. I was like, let's do that one next because that's the one I really want to talk about. That's the one that's been really sticking on my mind ever since I've seen it. It bothered me for weeks afterwards. Honestly, I was uncomfortable for weeks. Won't go too much into it, but I had a psychotic break last year, and some of the depictions of particularly just like the horrific and sadist stuff. Like I saw some really horrible things during my psychotic break. But like I said, I won't go too much into it. But like I literally was living in a hellscape at one point for a couple of months, and that's what my life was like. I was just seeing death and destruction and hell everywhere, and people being jovial at suffering, you know. So it was a lot. It was a lot. But yeah, thank you for joining us, talking about, well, listening to me talk about Come and See. Next week we're going to be delving further into the disturbing iceberg. We're going to be doing either Begotten or Vaza de Noches. We're going to put a poll up to make a decision on which one we do next. But I think the best thing for us to do right now is to continue with our disturbing iceberg and get it bloody finished. Because it's been a year and a bit in the making, and I think we need to get it done. So yeah, there'll
I
be.
feel like I've seen other pictures of icebergs that have got more films on.
No, I'm still sticking to that original.
I'll send you the
Uh,
picture.
okay. Well, we're doing like the very basic core Reddit one. So, but yeah, we'll be doing Vaza de Noches or Forgotten. Yeah. So we're putting a poll out on that, and we'll let you decide what we cover next. I haven't seen either of these films. Safer, have you seen either?
No.
No, no. Okay. So,
So I'm going in completely blind. I don't even know what either of them are about. So it should be
um,
interesting. Don't
yeah.
tell me. Don't tell me. I'll just find out when I
I
search the
know
film.
about Begotten. That's about it, but I won't share anything with you about it. So yeah, we'll put a poll up on that, and thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. If you could engage with our posts a little more on Instagram, really appreciate it, and also give us more listens because we want you to come back and listen to us. We miss
Yeah.
you. We do want you to listen to us. So yeah, yeah.
You can find us everywhere: Instagram, Spotify, other streaming platforms of that nature. YouTube currently as well.
And just one more minute before we go. Obviously, Maxine trailer dropped, as did Folia Do. Looking forward to both of them, but a bit apprehensive that Folia Do is a musical.
Folio do look shite.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and now I'm a bit apprehensive. I don't like the fact that they've kind of changed her origin story.
I'm not worried about that. It just looks shite. They should have left it at one film.
Yeah, well, I think Joaquin Phoenix in the Joker was amazing, so they've got to make it amazing, otherwise it's not going to work, is it?
But Maxine there, oofed. I will be
Oofed!
watching that.
Turns out, spoiler, she might be the Night Stalker.
I don't think she is. I think they're gonna make it so that he's like stalking her or something.
It's not going to be as straightforward as that, and you know full well it's not. There's going to
I
be
don't
some
know.
twist where
I don't
she
know because
thinks,
the other two films are pretty
that she's being.
straightforward.
No, because like the whole aspect of like Mia Goth's characters is that they're fucking crazy, you know. Um, yeah, like Pearl as an adult, insane. Pearl as a younger Pearl, insane. Maxine in herself becomes a ruthless killer in her attempts to survive so she can be fucking famous. Like we just don't know. We don't know. And obviously Pearl had so much wrong with her psychologically, although she's not biologically connected to Maxine. I feel like they will still have those kind of elements where there's psychological disturbance, and I have a feeling, and I hope I'm wrong, that she got something to do with the Night Stalker. I don't think she's a victim of him.
Maybe they're working together. Dun dun dun.
Yeah, maybe something like that, you know, just like her and her husband, right?
Maybe the
Pearl's
Night Stalker
husband.
is Kevin Bacon. The fact that
Maybe.
Kevin Bacon's in this film is fucking stupid, but
And
I'm still gonna watch it.
if he is the Night Stalker, lol. Um,
If Kevin Bacon's the Night Stalker, I called it here on the 13th of April, 2024. I want
yes.
my royalties.
All right. Well, you have been listening to episode 68, episode 69 coming up next week. Yeah. Thanks for listening to
Maybe,
us.
maybe not.
Shut up. Bye.
Goodbye.